Before we dive into today's gripping story, we want to take a moment to appreciate you, our amazing subscribers, new viewers, and the incredible community that makes Moonlight Tales by Samsey so special. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments mean the world to us, and we're beyond grateful for your support. If this is your first time here, welcome. You're in for a ride filled with drama, suspense, and unexpected twists. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. And of course, drop a comment below. We love hearing from you, and your support keeps us going. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive right back into the story, because things are about to get even more intense. The first week Daisy spent in Joel's house felt like the longest week of her life. She was now someone's wife, yet she felt more alone than she had ever felt in her whole life. She couldn't see, but she could feel. She could feel the silence around her. She could feel the heat, the sadness, and the emptiness in the air. It was too quiet in the house, too empty, and too hot. Joel didn't talk much. He would sit in one corner of the room while she sat in another. Sometimes he would look at her and open his mouth to say something, but then he would close it again and look away. He looked like he wanted to help her, but he didn't know how. He looked like he was hurting too. Daisy had only her ears and her hands to understand her new world. She spent her first 3 days learning how to walk around the small, rough room without bumping into things. Her hands touched every wall, every corner, every surface. The mattress was on the floor, no bed frame. The window had only an old wrapper instead of a real curtain. The stove was small, the pots were few, and there were no spoons, only a wooden stick. Even though she couldn't see, she could imagine how poor the place looked. She could feel it in the air and in the silence. She cried a lot during that week. Not loudly, no. She cried quietly. At night, when Joel was asleep or pretending to be asleep, she would bury her face in her wrapper and cry until her throat hurt. She wasn't crying because she missed Auntie Angela or Naomi or her uncle's house. She cried because she was scared of the future. She was scared of the sickness, HIV. That word stayed in her head like a monster hiding under her bed. She didn't understand much about the sickness, but she had heard enough to be afraid. They told her she would get sick too, just by being with Joel. That she would die slowly, painfully, and no one would help her. She didn't even know what Joel looked like. She had never touched his face. She didn't know if he was young or old, kind or wicked. But she knew one thing. He had not hurt her, not once. And that alone gave her a little peace. At least he had not treated her like her uncle or Auntie Angela or Naomi. He never shouted at her. He never raised his hand at her. He didn't force her to do anything. He just stayed in his corner, quiet. The heat in the house was terrible. The room had no fan, no ceiling, and only one tiny window that brought in hot air instead of cool breeze. Joel would try to lift the wrapper to let in some fresh air, but it never helped much. Daisy would sit on the floor with sweat dripping from her neck and arms, feeling like her skin was on fire. She would beg Joel to take her outside sometimes, just to sit under a tree or feel the wind on her face. And he would, without saying a word. He would gently hold her hand and lead her outside, then sit beside her in silence. On the 4th day, Daisy cooked her first meal in the house. Joel brought her to the corner where the stove and pots were. He placed her hands on each item and showed her where the matches were, where the food items were kept. He watched carefully as she moved, making sure she didn't burn herself. That day she made rice. It was half cooked and had too much salt, but Joel ate it all without complaining. When she asked if it tasted bad, he just smiled and said, "It's good." That night, Daisy felt something small grow inside her. It wasn't love. It wasn't trust. But it was something. Maybe hope. Still, she didn't trust him fully. How could she? She had trusted people before, and they only brought her pain. And now she was in a new place, with a stranger, with no friends, no money, and no sight. She was scared to sleep too deeply, scared he would change, scared one day he might do to her what others had done. But day after day, Joel never hurt her. He would bring her water. He would help her wash the dishes. He even asked if she needed help bathing, but she quickly said no. She didn't want to give him the wrong idea. Sometimes at night he would whisper to himself, She could hear him say things like, "I'm sorry," and "God help me." She didn't know what he meant, but she knew he was not happy either. Maybe he didn't want the marriage too. Maybe he was sick and tired, and maybe, just maybe, he was also a victim like her. On the sixth day, Daisy tried to smile for the first time. It was small, barely there, but it happened when Joel gave her a cup of cold water after coming back from the market. It felt like the nicest thing anyone had done for her in a long time. By the seventh day, she knew where every item in the room was. She knew how many steps it took to reach the door, the stove, the mattress. She was learning fast, but the fear inside her didn't go away. She still feared the future. She still feared getting sick. And deep down, she feared the people who put her in this marriage in the first place. But for now, she had to survive. She had to keep breathing. She had to wait and see what tomorrow would bring. And that was how Daisy's first week with Joel came to an end. Quiet, hot, scary, but strangely gentle. From the very first day Daisy stepped into her new home, Caro had been watching her. Caro was one of the neighbors in the compound, and even though Daisy could not see her, she could feel that someone nearby didn't like her. But Daisy didn't know why. She hadn't done anything wrong. She didn't even talk to anyone. She stayed quietly inside the house most of the time, trying to learn where everything was. But unknown to Daisy, her Auntie Angela and her friend, the woman who helped find Joel, had already paid Caro to make Daisy's life a nightmare. Caro was not a kind woman. She was poor and always angry at the world. So when Auntie Angela offered her money, she agreed quickly. "Make sure the blind girl suffers," they told her, and Caro promised she would. It started small. One morning, as Daisy stepped out to go to the market, Caro placed her foot across the path and pretended to be fixing her shoe. Daisy couldn't see, so she didn't know. She tripped and fell hard on the ground. Her elbow hit the rough sand and began to bleed. Caro gasped loudly, pretending to be shocked. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there," she said, laughing quietly as Daisy got up slowly, dusting off her clothes with shaking hands. That night, Daisy cried into her pillow. She didn't understand why someone would do that to her. She hadn't even spoken to that woman before. Her heart ached, but she told herself it was just a mistake. She didn't tell Joel. She didn't want to bring trouble into their home, but it didn't stop. A few days later, Daisy cooked rice for lunch. She was hungry and tired, but she was proud she could cook all by herself, even without seeing. She kept the pot covered and went to wash her hands at the back of the house. When she came back, she noticed something strange. The food smelled weird. She tasted a small spoonful and spit it out right away. There was sand in it. A lot of sand. She knew someone had opened the pot and poured sand inside while she stepped away. Her hands trembled as she covered the pot and sat down quietly. She didn't cry. She just sat there thinking. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "Why are they doing this to me?" She didn't eat that afternoon, and again she said nothing to Joel. The next day, Caro stood by the entrance when Daisy was returning from the market. She had a bag of vegetables in one hand and a bottle of oil in the other. As Daisy walked past, Caro quickly signaled to some children nearby. These children had no idea what was going on, but Caro had told them it was a game. She gave them coins and told them to throw small stones at Daisy. They did. The stones hit Daisy's legs and back. One hit her shoulder and made her drop the oil bottle. It broke into pieces. The children laughed. Caro stood by the corner, pretending she wasn't watching, but her face had a wicked smile. Daisy stood there for a moment, breathing hard. She didn't cry, not outside. She bent slowly, picked up her things, and walked away. Her legs were shaking and her heart was heavy, but she didn't say a word. She just went home. That night she cried again, but this time her tears were not just from pain, they were from confusion. "Why would people hurt someone who's already hurting?" she whispered. "What did I do to deserve this?" Days passed and Caro's wickedness grew stronger. One morning, Daisy woke up early to fetch water to bathe before Joel returned home from his small job. She filled her bucket and left it outside as she went in to grab her soap. That was when Caro saw her chance. She walked quickly to the bucket, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and pulled out a small bag of powdered pepper. She poured all of it into Daisy's water and quickly walked away. When Daisy returned, she picked up the bucket and carried it carefully to the general bathroom. She didn't know what was inside. As she poured the water over her body, she screamed. The pain was like fire. It burned her skin. Her whole body felt like it was on fire. She dropped the bucket and fell to her knees, scratching at her skin, crying out loud, "Help! Help me!" People came running. Someone brought clean water and poured it on her, but the damage had been done. Her skin turned red. Her body was sore. She couldn't even wear her dress properly. She had to lie on the bed, crying quietly all day. When Joel came back that evening, he was shocked. He saw her red, swollen skin and asked her, "What happened?" Daisy said, "I don't know. I used water to bathe, and then this happened." Joel looked around, confused and worried. But Daisy didn't tell him about Caro. She wasn't sure if she could trust him yet. She didn't want more problems, so she stayed silent. For 3 months, Caro did everything she could to make Daisy miserable. She replaced her clean water with hot water. She moved things around to make Daisy fall. She called her names like useless blind girl when no one else was listening. And every week she would call Auntie Angela to give a full report of her wicked deeds. "She's suffering just the way you asked," she would say proudly. And every time Daisy cried, she asked the same question, "Why me?" But no answer came. She began to pray more. Every night she asked God to send anyone to help her. "Please save me," she whispered again and again, her face soaked with tears. "Please send someone who cares." But even in all this pain, Daisy noticed one thing: Joel never hurt her. He never shouted at her. He never forced himself on her. He didn't understand everything, but he was kind in his own quiet way. He brought her food, helped her wash her wounds, and sat by her side when she was too weak to talk. And so, even when Daisy didn't know what the next day would bring, she held on to one tiny light. Hope. Hope that one day someone would stop the pain. That one day she wouldn't have to cry herself to sleep anymore. That maybe, just maybe, her story would change. The sun was already high in the sky. Its heat seeped into every corner of the tiny, unfinished building Daisy now called home. The walls were hot, the air was still, and there was no fan to push the heat away. Daisy sat quietly in the corner of the room, gently running her fingers along the edge of the plastic bucket she used for bathing. She had filled it earlier with water fetched from the public tap, and now it sat outside, waiting for her. She wiped her face, which was damp with sweat. It had been 3 months since the wedding, 3 long, painful months of loneliness, fear, and torment. Every day felt heavier than the one before. The only thing that gave her tiny comfort was bathing. Even though the water was usually cold and sometimes dirty, it was the only time she felt clean, not just outside, but deep in her soul. That morning, Joel had left early to look for work, leaving her alone once again. As usual, Daisy planned to take her bath once the neighbors had gone inside. She didn't want to meet anyone. She especially didn't want to see Caro. Caro was a neighbor, but not the kind you pray for. She was like a shadow, always nearby, always watching, always looking for new ways to hurt Daisy. From the very first week, Caro had started doing mean things, throwing sand in her food, hiding her water, and whispering cruel words into her ears when no one else was around. Daisy didn't know why the woman hated her so much. She had never spoken a word to her before moving in. What Daisy didn't know was that Caro had been paid by Auntie Angela, her very own blood. Her aunt had promised Caro a small amount of money every month if she could make Daisy's life worse than before. And Caro, who was desperate and bitter, accepted the job gladly. It gave her something to do, someone to control. That morning, Caro stood by her window, arms folded and eyes fixed on the blue bucket of water Daisy had placed outside. She saw Daisy walk slowly into the house, tapping her stick carefully, probably going to get her soap and towel. "This is the perfect time," Caro whispered to herself. She looked around quickly. No one was watching. In a flash, she tiptoed to the bucket and poured a generous amount of powdered pepper into the water. The pepper floated on top for a moment, then slowly dissolved into the water, making it look as normal as ever. Caro giggled and walked back inside. "Let's see how she likes her bath today," she murmured with a smirk. Daisy came out just a minute later, holding her small towel and soap. She bent down and carefully picked up the bucket. The water felt a little heavier than usual, but she didn't think much of it. After all, she couldn't see, and the smell of the pepper had already blended with the hot, dusty air around her. She didn't know what was waiting for her. She walked slowly to the general compound bathroom. The walls were stained, the floor was always wet, and the door barely closed, but it was all she had. Inside the bathroom, she carefully placed the bucket down. She took off her clothes and sat on a small stool. She dipped a small bowl into the water and gently poured it on her legs. At first, she felt a little sting. She paused. She poured more water over her chest. Then everything changed. "Ah! Ah!" Daisy screamed, dropping the bowl and standing up immediately. The pain hit her like fire. Her skin started to burn. Her eyes, her arms, her chest, even her private parts. It was as if she had poured boiling oil on herself. Her skin began to itch and burn at the same time, and she scratched and rubbed herself, but that only made it worse. She screamed louder, this time calling for help, but no one came. The neighbors who heard her just closed their windows and doors. They didn't want to get involved. They had seen too much already, and many were afraid of Caro. Daisy ran out of the bathroom, almost naked, water dripping from her body, her face twisted in pain. She stumbled her way back into the house, tears and sweat mixing on her cheeks. She fell to the floor inside and began rolling on the ground, crying, scratching, and begging God to help her. "Oh God, please, please help me. What did I do? Why is this happening to me?" She cried so hard that she lost her voice. She could barely breathe. The pain was inside her nose, her mouth, her eyes. Everything burned. Minutes passed, then an hour. By the time Joel came home, he found her lying on the floor, her towel loosely wrapped around her, her body red and swollen, her eyes shut tight from the pain. "Daisy!" he shouted, rushing to her. She didn't answer. He knelt beside her and touched her arm. It was hot, too hot. He looked around and saw the bucket standing in the corner, half full. He dipped his finger in and smelled the water. "Pepper?" he whispered, confused. He looked at Daisy again, now trembling and weak. "Who did this?" he asked softly. "Who did this to you?" But Daisy only shook her head. She didn't know. She didn't see. She was too afraid to guess. Joel helped her onto the mattress and got a wet towel to clean her skin. He tried to comfort her, but she couldn't stop crying. She had been through so much already, and now this. It felt like someone wanted her dead. That night, Daisy didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every inch of her body was on fire, and her heart felt even worse. Joel sat beside her, watching her suffer, helpless and angry. Something had to change. He could no longer keep quiet. He could no longer watch his wife be broken into pieces. That was the moment he made a decision. They had to leave. He didn't know where they were going yet, but staying here meant one thing: Daisy was going to die. Joel had always known that something wasn't right. From the very first night Daisy came into his house, she cried and cried like her heart was breaking into a million pieces. At first, he thought it was just because she missed her old life. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to see something deeper. Daisy never smiled. She hardly spoke. And no matter how hard he tried to be kind, she never truly relaxed around him. He couldn't blame her. He was a stranger to her, a blind girl forced into marriage with a man she didn't know. And not just any man, but one with a deadly sickness. Joel hated himself sometimes, not because he had HIV, but because people like Daisy were being used like pawns. She was dragged into a life she didn't choose, just like he was dragged into pain he never asked for. But what made Joel worried the most wasn't her silence. It was the bruises. It started slowly. One day he noticed a small scratch on her arm. She said she hit the door by mistake. Another day, her ankle was swollen. She told him she tripped over a stone. Joel didn't ask too many questions. He didn't want to make her feel like she was being forced to talk. But as time passed, her body told a different story. Her lips were dry and cracked. Her hands were always shaking. Her arms, her back, bruises everywhere. Some red, some already turning dark purple. She began to flinch whenever he came too close, like she was always afraid of being touched. One evening, Joel came back home early. He didn't tell her he was coming that early because he wanted to surprise her with some bananas and groundnuts he bought from the market. It was something small, but he hoped she would at least enjoy it. But what he saw when he got close to the house froze him in place. Just before he turned into their compound, he saw Caro, one of the women who lived nearby, sneering at Daisy and pouring a bucket of dirty water right where Daisy was about to step. Daisy, holding her walking stick and a bowl of vegetables, walked straight into the water, slipped, and fell hard on the ground. Joel dropped the bag in his hand and ran to her. "Daisy! Daisy!" he called out, kneeling beside her. She was shaking. Her palms were bleeding, and she was struggling to hold back tears. "It's nothing," she whispered, trying to get up. "I just slipped." But Joel saw the look on Caro's face. That smirk, that evil smile. He felt his blood boil. "Did you do this?" he asked Caro, standing up. Caro rolled her eyes and hissed, "Are you blaming me for the rain too? You think your blind wife can't fall on her own?" Joel stared at her, his fist clenched, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he lifted Daisy gently and carried her inside. That night, Joel couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor watching Daisy as she lay curled up on the mattress, her face turned to the wall. He wanted to ask her everything. He wanted to know what she was going through, why she never told him anything. But something inside him told him that pushing her too hard might scare her even more. The next morning, Joel boiled some water and made pap for both of them. He placed hers in a small bowl, added a little milk, and gently placed it in her hand. "Eat," he said softly. "You need strength." She touched the bowl and nodded. She still didn't say a word. Joel sat beside her and watched her for a while. Then he spoke again. "Daisy, I saw what happened yesterday. That woman. She meant to hurt you." Daisy stopped eating. Joel continued. "This isn't the first time, is it? The bruises, the cuts. Someone's hurting you, Daisy. Please talk to me. I can help." Her lips trembled. He leaned closer. "I know I'm not the man you dreamed of marrying. I know you're scared. And I know you don't trust me yet. But I swear to you, I will never hurt you. All I want is for you to be safe." For the first time, Daisy looked in his direction. She couldn't see him, but her face turned slowly toward his voice. "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why do you care?" Joel swallowed hard. He didn't expect that question. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone," he said. "I've lived most of my life with people who pretend to care. People who only see my sickness, not my soul. I don't want that for you. I want to protect you, if you let me." A tear rolled down Daisy's cheek. "I don't know who she is," Daisy finally whispered. "But someone always puts things in my food, my water. Sometimes she burns me, hits me, calls me names. I don't know why. I've never done anything to anyone." Joel felt a deep sadness settle in his heart. So it was true. Someone was truly hurting his wife right under his nose. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked gently. "Because I don't want more trouble," she said. "I thought if I just stayed quiet, maybe she'll stop. But it keeps getting worse." Joel moved closer and took her hand. "It ends now," he said. "I promise you, I won't let anyone hurt you again." She nodded slowly, still shaking. For the first time since their wedding day, Daisy felt like someone actually wanted to protect her, not use her, not break her, but truly protect her. She wasn't sure yet if she could trust Joel completely, but in that moment, sitting quietly with the man everyone said was a monster because of his sickness, she felt a tiny spark of safety. Maybe, just maybe. She wasn't alone anymore. For 3 whole months, Daisy's life became a painful routine of suffering. Every day brought new torment at the hands of Caro, the wicked neighbor who seemed to have no heart. Daisy tried her best to stay out of everyone's way, hoping that if she was quiet enough, careful enough, maybe the torment would stop on its own. But it didn't. The silent tears she cried at night were her only company. All she had was the thin, torn blanket covering her and the sounds of the empty, broken home that now felt more like a cage. Joel saw her pain, even though Daisy never spoke a word of it. He noticed her bruises, the slow way she walked as if in fear of something, the way her hands trembled when she washed their dishes, always double-checking that they were clean enough. He noticed the way she flinched when he accidentally raised his voice even slightly. She was living in fear, and it broke him. But the worst part for Joel was that he had no idea what or who was causing her pain. Every time he asked, Daisy would simply shake her head and whisper, "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Joel wasn't blind. He saw the marks on her soft skin. He saw the fresh, red welts from punishments she would never explain. He also knew that Daisy had learned long ago to keep quiet about the harm done to her. She had been programmed to think that no one would help her, even her own husband. One night, Joel watched Daisy as she sat on the floor of their small empty room, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She didn't know he was watching her, and yet he saw everything she was trying to hide. The sadness in her eyes and the way her mouth trembled like she had words she wanted to say, but was too scared to speak. It was then that Joel made a decision. He would not sit by and watch his wife be destroyed in silence. If Daisy wouldn't speak, then he would act. The very next morning, Joel's behavior changed. He didn't tell Daisy much, only that she shouldn't worry about cooking or cleaning. He barely spoke to her at all, and when he did, his words were short, almost distant. He spent most of the day outside, walking, talking to people she didn't know, and whispering in hushed tones with neighbors. When he returned home that evening, there was something different in his voice. Daisy could hear it when he spoke to her, something like urgency, maybe even fear. He asked her questions he had never asked before. "Are you okay, Daisy? Has anyone said anything to you? Did anyone touch you today?" Daisy, startled by his sudden interest, only shook her head. She could feel her heart beating fast as if some danger was close by, but she didn't know what it was. The following day, Joel didn't go to work. Instead, he spent the entire afternoon pacing the small room like a trapped animal. Daisy could feel the energy shift in the house, something heavy, something coming. At one point, Joel stopped pacing. His footsteps came toward her, and then he knelt down beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Pack nothing," he said. "Not a thing." Daisy's heart skipped a beat. "Joel, why? Are we moving?" He didn't answer at first. His hand found hers, hesitating as if unsure. She could feel him squeeze her fingers, gently but firmly. "I'm taking you somewhere safe," he finally said, his voice cracking. "Somewhere they can't hurt you anymore." Daisy didn't know what he meant. Who was they? Wasn't she safe with Joel? Or was this another trick? A new punishment? Her chest tightened as fear washed over her all over again. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling. Joel stood up, avoiding the question. "You'll know when we get there." That night, Daisy couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump. Every whisper of wind outside felt like a warning of something big and unknown. But there was one thing she knew for sure: something was about to change. Forever. Joel held Daisy's hand gently as they walked out of the compound. He didn't say much. In fact, he didn't say anything at all, and that silence made Daisy's heart beat a little faster. The sun was up already, and though she could not see it, she could feel its heat on her face. She didn't know where they were going or why Joel suddenly decided to take her somewhere, but a part of her hoped they were going to a place where no one would hurt her again. Her steps were slow. Every few minutes, she would stop to ask if they had arrived, and Joel would quietly say, "Not yet." They boarded a small bus at the roadside, and Joel helped her sit next to the window. Even though she couldn't see the road, she felt the wind brushing against her face and the loud sound of the engine rumbling through her body. It was the first time she had left that compound since she got married. She could feel people walking in and out of the bus, some talking loudly, some quiet. She kept her head low, holding tightly to her small purse. The only thing she carried with her. As the bus moved, Daisy felt her heart moving too. Something inside her felt scared, but something else felt free. She didn't know why, but this ride felt different. It didn't feel like she was being dragged into pain. It felt like something new was waiting, something she didn't understand yet. The journey was long. Sometimes Joel would hold her hand. Sometimes he would just look at her quietly, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. They passed through villages. Daisy could hear children playing, cows mooing, and women calling out things they were selling. They passed trees, big ones. The air began to smell fresher, cooler, like they were climbing a hill or moving into a forest area. She asked Joel again where they were going. Joel paused, then finally spoke. "To a place where no one will hurt you again."